I walked into the packed courtroom, my heart pounding against my ribs. My parents sat at the plaintiff's table, dressed in expensive suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. When they saw me, they rolled their eyes in perfect unison, the same contempt had seen my whole life. The bailiff announced Judge Howard's entry. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, gray hair perfectly combed. He took his seat and began reviewing the case file. Then he looked up at me, sitting at the defendant's table. His face froze. His eyes went wide. Slowly, he stood. The courtroom went silent. "Wait," he said, his voice cutting through the tension. "You're Robin Carter?" The Robin Carter. My parents looked confused. They had no idea what he was talking about. I sat there at the defendant's table, watching Judge Howard's expression shift from shock to something that looked like respect. My lawyer, Diane Foster, gave me a slight nod. She was in her 50s, sharp as a blade, with gray streaks in her dark hair. Shed told me this case would get emotional, but I hadn't expected this. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up here, being sued by my own parents for $7 million. My name is Robin Carter. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a paramedic in the metro area. I've lived here my whole life, born and raised in suburban Connecticut. My parents, Douglas and Patricia Carter, had me when they were young, barely out of college. Douglas became a corporate accountant, climbing the ladder at a big firm. Patricia got into real estate, selling houses to wealthy families. They did well for themselves. Upper middle class neighborhood, nice house with 4 bedrooms, 2-car garage, the whole package. But they never wanted me. I figured that out around age 5. I remember sitting at the dinner table, trying to tell them about my day at kindergarten. I'd made a clay turtle in art class and was so proud of it. My dad didn't even look up from his plate. My mom just said, "That's nice, honey," in that tone that meant she wasn't listening at all. When they had friends over for dinner parties, they'd send me to my room. I wasn't part of the picture they wanted to present to the world. My bedroom was in the basement. They said it was to give me privacy, but I knew better. They wanted me out of sight. Their master suite was on the 2nd floor, as far away from me as possible in that house. I'd lie awake at night, hearing them laugh with their friends upstairs, and wonder what I'd done wrong. School events were the worst. Every play, every science fair, every parent-teacher conference. I'd scan the audience hoping to see them. They never came. Not once. The teachers noticed. I remember Mrs. Henderson, my 3rd-grade teacher, pulling me aside one day. She asked if everything was okay at home. I told her it was fine because I didn't know how to explain that my parents just didn't care. They compared me to other kids constantly. The neighbor's son got straight A's. Why couldn't I? The kid down the street made the travel soccer team. Why wasn't I athletic? Everything I did was measured against some invisible standard I could never reach. By the time I was 12, I stopped trying to get their attention. What was the point? But then there was Grandpa Samuel. Samuel Carter was my dad's father, and he was everything my parents weren't. He lived about 30 minutes away in a modest 2-story house, with a big workshop in the garage. He wasn't flashy about money, even though I later learned Head made millions through smart investments over the decades. He lived simply, drove a 10-year-old truck, and spent his time building things with his hands. When I was 7 years old, Grandpa Samuel showed up at our house one Saturday morning. Head noticed something was off. I don't know if my dad complained about me or if Grandpa just saw it in my eyes, but he started inviting me over every weekend. My parents agreed immediately, probably relieved to have me out of the house. Those weekends with Grandpa Samuel saved my life. I mean that literally. He taught me how to use tools, how to build birdhouses and small furniture. We'd go fishing at the lake, sitting in comfortable silence or talking about everything and nothing. He taught me how to cook, how to fix things around the house, how to change a tire. Practical skills, sure. But more than that, He taught me I had value. He never badmouthed my parents. Never once said anything negative about them directly. But he showed me through his actions what real love looked like. He showed up. He listened. He cared about my thoughts and feelings. He told me stories about his own life, about working hard, about dignity, about character being more important than money or status. When I was 15, I told Grandpa Samuel I wanted to become a paramedic. He'd seen an ambulance crew save a man having a heart attack at the grocery store, and something clicked inside me. I wanted to help people. I wanted to be there when someone needed me most. My parents mocked that dream mercilessly. Why not become a doctor? They asked. Why waste my potential on a blue-collar job? They wanted me to go into finance or law, something prestigious they could brag about at cocktail parties. When I stuck to my decision, they got colder. The little attention they'd given me evaporated completely. Grandpa Samuel was different. He sat me down in his workshop and said, "Robin, the world needs good paramedics more than it needs another lawyer chasing money. You do what calls to your heart." Then he did something I didn't know about until years later. He paid for my college education. My parents thought I'd gotten scholarships, and I let them believe it. Grandpa made me promise not to tell them. He said, "This is between you and me. They don't need to know." I moved out the day I turned 18, got a small apartment, worked part-time while going through paramedic training. It was hard, but I was free. My parents didn't call, didn't text, didn't visit. I invited them to my graduation from the paramedic program. They didn't show. Sent a card with a $50 bill inside and a note that said congratulations. That was it. I tried for a few more years to maintain some kind of relationship, called them on holidays. They were always too busy. Invited them to dinner. They had other plans. Eventually, around age 25, I stopped trying. They'd made their choice. I was essentially dead to them because I didn't fit their definition of success. But Grandpa Samuel never stopped. Weekly dinners at his house continued until I was 30 years old. Every Sunday, rain or shine, I'd drive to his place. We'd cook together, eat together, talk about life. He was my family. The only family that mattered. 3 months ago, everything changed. Grandpa Samuel died at age 87. It was peaceful, in his sleep, the way everyone hopes to go. But it destroyed me. I gave the eulogy at his funeral, barely able to get the words out through my tears. My parents attended, standing in the back of the church, but they didn't speak to me. They left before the reception. A week after the funeral, Grandpa Samuel's lawyer called me in for the reading of the will. I sat in that office, still numb with grief, not really caring about money or possessions. Then the lawyer read the will out loud. Grandpa Samuel had left me $7 million. $7 million. The house, the investments, everything. To me. My parents got $10,000 each. The lawyer read Grandpa Samuel's words. Robin has been the grandson who truly cared. He deserves this reward for his character and love. To my son Douglas and daughter-in-law Patricia, I leave you what you gave Robin. The minimum. I looked across the room at my parents' faces. Shock, then rage. Pure, undiluted rage. They didn't say a word to me, just stormed out. 1 week later, I was served with a lawsuit. They were suing me for the entire inheritance. Their claim was undue influence. They said I'd manipulated a senile old man, isolated him from his family, and tricked him into leaving me everything. They wanted it all redistributed to them as the rightful heirs. And now here I sat in this courtroom, watching Judge Howard stare at me with recognition I didn't understand. Judge Howard cleared his throat, still standing. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice formal, but tinged with emotion. "For the record, are you the same Robin Carter who is a paramedic With the Metro Emergency Services? Yes, Your Honor, I replied, confused about where this was going. Are you the paramedic from the Riverside Mall collapse last year? My stomach dropped. I hadn't expected this to come up. Yes, Your Honor. The courtroom erupted in whispers. People leaned forward in their seats. I glanced at my parents. Douglas looked irritated by the interruption. Patricia's face showed pure confusion. They had no idea what the judge was talking about. Judge Howard sat back down, slowly, shaking his head slightly. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know, Mr. Carter is a decorated hero. He saved 12 lives during one of the worst disasters in our state's history. He looked at my parents' lawyer. Please proceed with the case. But I wanted that on the record. I saw my parents exchange glances. They were completely lost. Let me tell you about that day. It was 14 months ago, middle of a Tuesday afternoon. I was off duty, running errands at Riverside Mall. It's this huge shopping complex with a multi-level parking garage built above the main shopping area. I was in the electronics store, looking at a new phone, when I heard this sound, like thunder, but wrong, deeper, more violent. Then the screaming started. The parking garage had collapsed. 3 floors of concrete and steel pancaked down onto the shopping area below. The structure failed catastrophically. Later, engineers said it was a combination of poor maintenance and too much weight. Whatever the cause, the result was hell. 73 people trapped in the rubble. Concrete slabs the size of cars crushing stores. Dust everywhere, making it impossible to see or breathe. I didn't think. My training just kicked in. I ran toward the collapse instead of away from it. Found the first victim within minutes, a teenage boy pinned under a concrete beam. I stabilized his neck, kept him talking while other people helped me lift the beam enough to pull him out. Then I heard more screaming. A woman trapped in what used to be a clothing store. Then an elderly man. Then 3 children, huddled under a collapsed stairwell. I crawled through spaces barely wide enough for my body. The structure was unstable. Secondary collapses kept happening. Concrete shifting and falling. I could hear the groaning of metal, the cracking of stressed materials. Every instinct screamed at me to get out, but I couldn't. There were people alive in there. They needed help. The worst was Emma. She was 6 years old, trapped under a massive concrete slab that had crushed her legs. I found her 4 hours into the rescue operation. She was screaming for her mom. Terrified, in shock. I squeezed into the space next to her, held her hand, and sang every silly song I could remember from my own childhood. Talked to her about her favorite cartoon characters. Anything to keep her conscious and calm. The rescue team worked for 2 hours to move that slab. I stayed with Emma the whole time. My ribs broke when a secondary collapse sent debris down on us. I covered her body with mine. Took the impact. Didn't matter. She needed to know someone was there. When they finally got her out, I rode in the ambulance with her to the hospital. Made sure she got to the operating room safely. Then, and only then, did I let the doctors look at me. Broken ribs, severe lacerations across my back and arms. A concussion. Internal bruising. Id inhaled so much concrete dust my lungs looked like a construction site on the X-rays. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Grandpa Samuel came every single day. Sat by my bed, read to me when the pain meds made me too groggy to talk. Helped me walk the hallways when physical therapy started. He was there. My parents? Nothing. Not a phone call? Not a text? Not a card? They didn't even know it happened. The mall collapse was national news for weeks. My name and photo were everywhere. Governor came to the hospital, gave me the Medal of Valor. The Carnegie Hero Fund Commission sent representatives to present their medal. Local newspapers ran stories calling me the Guardian of Riverside. But Douglas and Patricia Carter had no idea their son almost died saving 12 people. Back in the courtroom, I watched realization slowly dawn on other people's faces. Several people in the gallery started whispering, pointing at me. A woman in the third row put her hand over her mouth, eyes wide. The bailiff looked at me with new respect. Judge Howard gestured for the proceedings to continue. My parents' lawyer, Bernard Finch, stood up. He was one of those expensive lawyers who wore custom suits and too much cologne. Slick, confident, used to winning. Your Honor, Finch began, smoothly trying to redirect attention. While Mr. Carter's actions during that tragedy were certainly commendable, they have no bearing on this case. We are here to discuss the will of Samuel Carter and whether it represents his true wishes or the result of manipulation. Diane, my lawyer, stood. Your Honor, it absolutely has bearing. It speaks to Mr. Carter's character, which is central to understanding why Samuel Carter left him the inheritance. Judge Howard nodded. I agree. Continue, Mr. Finch. Finch launched into his opening statement. He painted Grandpa Samuel as a confused old man, vulnerable and easily influenced. He claimed Id isolated Samuel from his son, my father, over the course of years, that Id spent decades carefully manipulating Samuel for financial gain. He pointed to my weekly visits as evidence of suspicious behavior. What reasonable person visits their grandfather every single week for years? Finch asked, as if love and loyalty were crimes. The only explanation is calculation. Robin Carter knew his grandfather was wealthy and positioned himself as the favored heir. He showed charts about the inheritance distribution. 7 million to me, 10,000 each to my parents. No rational father would disinherit his son so completely unless he was unduly influenced, Finch argued. Samuel Carter was a successful businessman, a logical man. This will makes no sense unless we accept that Robin Carter manipulated him. I sat there listening to them twist everything good about my relationship with Grandpa Samuel into something ugly. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Then, it was Diane's turn. She stood slowly, buttoned her suit jacket, and walked to the center of the courtroom. She was calm, methodical, like a surgeon preparing for a precise operation. Your Honor, I'd like to present some evidence that provides context for this case. She held up a folder. These are hospital records from Robin Carter's stay at Metro General Hospital following the Riverside Mall collapse. She handed copies to the judge and to Finch. I saw my parents lean forward, trying to see what was on the papers. As you can see, Diane continued, Mr. Carter sustained serious injuries requiring extensive treatment. The medical bills totaled over $200,000, a catastrophic amount for someone in his profession. She paused for effect. Samuel Carter paid every single bill, every penny. He did this without being asked, without hesitation. He told the hospital billing department, and I quote from their records, "That's what family does for each other." The courtroom was silent. Diane wasn't done. But here's what's most relevant to this case. Samuel Carter called his son Douglas and informed him that Robin had been seriously injured. Samuel asked if Douglas and Patricia wanted to help with the medical expenses, or at least visit their son in the hospital. My heart started pounding. I hadn't known this part. Diane pulled out another document. These are phone records showing a 17-minute conversation between Samuel Carter and Douglas Carter on the day Robin was admitted to the hospital. I also have a sworn affidavit from Samuel's neighbor, who was present during part of this call and heard Samuel's side of the conversation. She looked directly at my parents. Douglas and Patricia Carter refused to help. They told Samuel, and again I quote, "He made his choices. He can live with the consequences." The courtroom gasped. I saw people turn to stare at my parents. Patricia's face went white. Douglas sat stone-faced, but his hands clenched into fists on the table. Judge Howard looked at my parents with barely concealed disgust. "Is this true, Mr. Carter?" Douglas stood slowly. "We didn't know how serious it was," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You didn't ask, Judge Howard replied flatly. Sit down. The power in the room had shifted. I wasn't just a defendant anymore. I was a hero they'd abandoned. And everyone in that courtroom now knew it. Finch tried to recover. Your Honor, I'd like to call my first witness, Douglas Carter. My father stood and walked to the witness stand. He was 58 years old, 6 feet tall, hair graying at the temples in that distinguished way some men get. He wore a navy blue suit that probably cost $3,000. Everything about him screamed success and control. The bailiff swore him in. Douglas sat down, adjusted his tie, and looked completely comfortable. This was his element. Boardrooms, presentations, performing under pressure. Mr. Carter, Finch began, can you describe your relationship with your son, Robin? Of course, Douglas said smoothly. Robin is my only child. I've always supported his choices, even when I didn't agree with them. We've had a normal father-son relationship. Some distance, as he got older and more independent. But that's natural. I felt my jaw clench. Diane put a hand on my arm, a silent reminder to stay calm. And your relationship with your father, Samuel Carter. Very close, Douglas said without hesitation. I called him regularly, visited as often as I could. My father knew I loved him. Did you notice any changes in your father's mental state in his final years? Yes, Douglas said, nodding seriously. He seemed forgetful, sometimes confused about dates or recent events. I was concerned but didn't want to take away his independence. It was all lies, every word, but Douglas delivered them with perfect confidence. Finch finished his direct examination. Then it was Diana's turn. She stood, holding a thick folder, and approached the witness stand with a slight smile. Mr. Carter, you testified that you supported Robin's choices. Is that correct? Yes. Even his decision to become a paramedic. Douglas hesitated for just a fraction of a second. Yes. Diane pulled out a document. This is a recording of a conversation at a family gathering 6 years ago. Your cousin made this recording. In it, you say, and I quote, Robin is wasting his life playing ambulance driver. It's embarrassing. He could have been something, but he chose to be nobody. She looked up. Does that sound supportive to you? Douglas' face reddened. I may have said that in frustration, but I didn't mean it. Really? Because there are 4 other recorded instances of you making similar statements. Diane pulled out more papers. Here you tell your golf partner that Robin is a disappointment. Here you tell a colleague that you don't discuss your son because there's nothing worth discussing. Here you tell your wife Patricia that Robin is dead to you. The courtroom was silent. Douglas had no response. Let's talk about your visits to your father. You testified you visited often. As often as I could. Diane held up a calendar. This is Samuel Carter's personal calendar. He documented every visit, every phone call, every interaction. Over the last 5 years of his life, you visited him 12 times. 12 times in 5 years. Your son Robin visited 263 times. Every single Sunday except when he was hospitalized after the mall collapse. She let that sink in. Your phone records show you called your father, on average, once every 6 to 8 weeks. Calls lasted between 3 and 12 minutes. Robin called him 3 times a week. Calls lasted between 20 minutes and over an hour. Douglas looked like he wanted to disappear. One more question, Mr. Carter. When was the last time you told your son you loved him? Silence. Douglas stared at his hands. I'll note for the record that the witness is not answering. Diane returned to her seat. Next. Finch called Patricia to the stand. My mother looked nervous. She was 56, always dressed impeccably, hair dyed to hide the gray, makeup perfect. Shed built her whole identity on appearances. Under Finch's questioning, she played the wounded mother, said she loved me, always had, always would. Claimed I was the one who'd pushed them away, choosing independence over family. Said Grandpa Samuel had been declining mentally, easily confused. Then Diane stood for cross-examination. Mrs. Carter, you testified that you love your son. Correct. Of course. When was the last time you told him that? Patricia opened her mouth, closed it. I don't remember exactly. It's been a while. Has it been a year? 5 years? 10 years? I'm not sure. Diane pulled out a laptop and turned it to face the courtroom. This is your Facebook page, Mrs. Carter. You're quite active on social media. Over 3,000 posts in the last 10 years. She scrolled through. Here are posts about your vacations. 17 trips to Europe, the Caribbean, Hawaii. Here are posts about restaurants you've visited, wines you've tasted, shopping trips, spa days. She kept scrolling. In 10 years of posts, you have not mentioned your son once. Not a single time. No birthday wishes. No congratulations on his career. Nothing. Patricia's face was pale. But you do post about other people's children. Here you congratulate your neighbor's daughter on her college graduation. Here you celebrate your realtor colleague's son getting engaged. Here you praise your book club friend's grandson for making the honor roll. Diane looked up. Why do you celebrate other people's children but never your own son? I'm private about family matters, Patricia said weakly. Diane pulled out more screenshots. Yet here you post about your husband's promotion. Here you post about your mother's birthday party. Here you post about your nephew's wedding. She closed the laptop. You're not private about family, Mrs. Carter. You're private about Robin. Why is that? Patricia had no answer. Let me ask directly. Did you know your son was hospitalized for 2 weeks after the Riverside Mall collapse? We didn't know it was that serious. Because you never called to find out. You never visited. You never even sent a card. Diane's voice was sharp. Your son nearly died saving 12 people, and you couldn't be bothered to check on him. Patricia looked at the floor. Diane called her next witness, Dr. Helen Armstrong. A woman in her 60s walked to the stand. She had kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a bun. She was sworn in and took her seat. Dr. Armstrong, what is your relationship to Samuel Carter? I was his primary care physician for 20 years. Can you describe his mental state in the years before his death? Samuel was sharp as a tack until the day he died, Dr. Armstrong said firmly. No signs of dementia, Alzheimer's, or any cognitive decline. His medical records document regular cognitive assessments. He passed them all with flying colors. She pulled out a file. 1 year before his death, at age 86, Samuel scored in the 98th percentile on cognitive function tests. His memory was excellent. His reasoning was clear. There was absolutely nothing wrong with his mind. Did he ever discuss his grandson Robin with you? Dr. Armstrong's face softened. All the time. Samuel talked about Robin at every appointment. He was so proud. Kept newspaper clippings about Robin's rescues in his wallet. Showed them to everyone. Her voice got emotional. He loved that boy more than anything in the world. Finch tried to discredit her on cross-examination but couldn't shake her testimony. The medical records were clear. Then Diane called her bombshell witness. I call Marcus Webb to the stand. A man in his 40s walked forward. He wore a simple gray suit and carried a briefcase. After being sworn in, he identified himself as an estate attorney. Mr. Webb, what is your relationship to this case? I drafted Samuel Carter's will. The courtroom leaned forward. Can you describe the circumstances under which the will was created? Marcus opened his briefcase and pulled out detailed notes. 2 years ago, Samuel came to my office. He wanted to update his will. He was very clear about his intentions. Very specific about what he wanted. Did he seem confused or easily influenced? Not at all. Samuel was one of the most clear-headed clients I've ever had. He knew exactly what he wanted and why. Did he discuss his reasoning with you? Yes. He said had been thinking about it for years. He loved his grandson Robin deeply and wanted to reward him for his character and loyalty. Then, Marcus dropped the bomb. But before Samuel came to me, he did something else first. He called his son Douglas and daughter-in-law Patricia. My parents tensed. Samuel told them he was updating his will. He invited them to have a family dinner with Robin, to try to repair their relationship. He offered to mediate, to help them reconnect with their son. Marcus looked at his notes. Douglas' response, which I documented in my file notes from what Samuel told me, was, "Dad, Robin made his choice. We've moved on. Do what you want with your money." He flipped a page. Patricia added, "Maybe it'll teach him he should have become someone successful." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Howard banged his gavel for silence. After that conversation, Samuel came to my office. He told me, "I know what I need to do. My grandson has shown me more love than my own son. He deserves to be rewarded for that." Marcus paused. "There's one more thing." Samuel left detailed letters explaining his decisions. He wanted to make sure everyone understood his reasoning. Judge Howard leaned forward. "Are these letters available?" "Yes, Your Honor. They're sealed and in my possession, per Samuel's instructions. They were to be opened only if the will was contested. I order them entered into evidence," Judge Howard said. "Well, read them tomorrow morning. Court is adjourned." As people filed out, I saw my parents sitting frozen at their table. They looked terrified. They were losing this case badly, and they knew it. Everything they'd built their lives on, reputation and appearance, was crumbling. The whole courtroom now knew they'd abandoned their hero son and lied about it. I walked out into the afternoon sun. Jake, my paramedic partner, was waiting outside. He clapped me on the shoulder. "You okay, man?" "I don't know," I admitted. "This is harder than I thought it would be." "You're doing great. The truth is coming out. That's what matters." I nodded, but inside, I felt hollow. These were my parents, and they'd chosen money over me again. They'd actually convinced themselves they deserved Grandpa Samuel's money more than I did. Even now, even after everything, they couldn't see what they'd done wrong. Tomorrow, Grandpa Samuel's letters would be read. I had no idea what they said, but I trusted him. Had always known the right thing to do. The next morning, the courtroom was even more crowded. Word had spread about the case. I recognized some faces from the fire station. Colleagues who'd taken personal time to support me. Emma's parents, Laura and Stephen Parker, sat in the third row. Their daughter was the 6-year-old Id, saved from the mall collapse. They'd reached out to Diane, wanting to help however they could. My parents arrived separately, not speaking to each other. Patricia looked like she hadn't slept. Douglas' usual confidence was gone, replaced by a tight, drawn expression. Judge Howard entered, and we all stood. When he sat, he gestured to the bailiff. "Please bring forward the sealed letters from Samuel Carter's estate." Marcus Webb approached with a locked box. He opened it with a small key and removed 3 envelopes. Each was labeled in Grandpa Samuel's distinctive handwriting. "To my son Douglas, to Patricia, and to my grandson Robin. Mr. Webb, please summarize the authentication of these documents," Judge Howard said. "These letters were written by Samuel Carter in my presence 2 years ago. I witnessed his signature. They were sealed immediately and have remained in my secure possession since then. There is no question of their authenticity. The court accepts them as genuine. Please have the clerk read them aloud." The court clerk, a middle-aged woman with reading glasses, approached. She opened the first envelope carefully. "Letter to Douglas Carter," she announced, then began reading. "My dear son Douglas, am writing this knowing you may never read it, or if you do, it will be because you've challenged the will I'm about to create. If that's the case, I hope these words help you understand why I've made the choices I have." I watched my father's face. He stared straight ahead, jaw tight. I've watched you over the years become someone I don't recognize. The boy I raised valued honesty, kindness, and human connection. The man you've become values status, money, and appearances. I don't know where I failed you, but somewhere along the way, you lost sight of what matters. Patricia glanced at Douglas. He didn't move. When Robin was born, I was so excited to be a grandfather. I imagined you teaching him to fish, playing catch in the backyard, being the father I tried to be for you. Instead, I watched you treat your son like an inconvenience, like a burden you resented. The clerk's voice was steady, but I could hear the emotion in Grandpa Samuel's words. I'll never forget the day Robin came to my house crying. He was 8 years old, had won an award at school for a story he wrote, and he wanted to show you. You told him you were too busy. You didn't even look at it. So he brought it to me. We framed it together and hung it in my workshop. It's still there. I remembered that day. I remembered Grandpa Samuel telling me he was proud of me, that my writing was beautiful. It had meant everything. Over the years, I tried to talk to you about Robin, tried to encourage you to be present in his life. You always had excuses. Work was busy. You and Patricia had plans. Robin was old enough to be independent. Every excuse was just another way of saying you didn't care enough to try. Douglas' hands were shaking slightly. The moment I knew I had to change my will was when you told me Robin's career choice embarrassed you. Your son chose to save lives, and you were embarrassed. That's when I understood you'd lost all perspective. Robin has more character in his little finger than most people have in their whole bodies. And you were ashamed of him. The clerk paused to turn a page. I'm leaving most of my estate to Robin, not to punish you, but to reward him. Has earned it through years of love, loyalty, and genuine care. He visited me every week not because he wanted money, but because he valued our relationship. He called to check on me, helped me with projects around the house, listened to my stories even though had heard them 100 times. That's what family does. I felt tears building behind my eyes. To you, Douglas, I'm leaving $10,000. It's more than you deserve, honestly. But you're still my son. I hope someday you realize that Robin has been trying to teach you by example what it means to be a good man. Maybe you'll learn. I'm not hopeful, but I am hoping. The letter ended. I raised you better than this, son. You have a good man for a child, and you threw him away like garbage. I hope someday you realize what you lost. I love you, but I don't like who you've become. Dad. The courtroom was silent. I looked at my father. One tear ran down his cheek, but his expression remained rigid. The clerk opened the second envelope. Letter to Patricia Carter. This letter was shorter but more cutting. Patricia, I'm writing to you separately because you need to hear things your husband won't tell you. You've encouraged Douglas' worst instincts. You've measured my grandson's worth by his salary and social status, instead of his character. That's a terrible way to judge any human being, but especially your own child. Patricia's face was pale. I remember the day Robin graduated from high school. He invited you to the ceremony. You and Douglas went to a resort in the Bahamas instead. When I asked you about it later, you said it wasn't that important, that Robin would understand. He understood. All right. He understood you didn't care. The clerk continued reading specific incidents Grandpa Samuel had witnessed. Robin's 21st birthday when they didn't call. Holidays when they claimed to be too busy but posted photos of parties with friends. The time Robin made paramedic and wanted to share the news but got their voicemail 3 times and they never called back. You once told me that Robin embarrassed you with his blue-collar job. Those were your exact words. Embarrassed. Your son saves lives, Patricia. He runs into burning buildings and collapsed structures, while everyone else runs out. He holds dying people's hands and gives them comfort in their final moments. And you're embarrassed. Patricia was crying now, silent tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. I'd rather have a grandson who saves lives than one who makes millions counting other people's money. Robin has more character in his pinky than most people have in their whole bodies. You've missed out on knowing an extraordinary young man because you were too busy measuring him against a yardstick that doesn't matter. The letter ended. I hope someday you wake up and realize what you've lost. But am not optimistic. Samuel. The third envelope was larger. Letter to my grandson, Robin. The clerk's voice softened as she read. My dearest Robin, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and I want you to know something important. You made my final years the best years of my life. I couldn't stop the tears now. They ran freely down my face. When you were 7 years old, and I first invited you to my house, I could see the sadness in your eyes. A child shouldn't look that sad. I promised myself I'd do whatever I could to show you that you mattered, that you were loved, that you had value beyond measure. Grandpa Samuel described our fishing trips, our woodworking projects, our Sunday dinners. Every detail he remembered perfectly. You once asked me why I stayed close to you when your parents didn't. I told you that real family is chosen, not assigned. I chose you, Robin. Not because you're my blood, but because you're good. You have a kind heart, a strong spirit, and a moral compass that never wavers. Those qualities are rare and precious. The letter revealed things I hadn't known. Grandpa Samuel had kept a scrapbook of my entire career. Every news article about rescues he'd been part of, every commendation, every photo he could find. The scrapbook was in his bedroom closet with instructions for it to be given to me. I followed your career obsessively, Robin. I was so proud of you I could barely stand it. When the news covered the Riverside Mall collapse, I sat glued to the television for 11 straight hours, praying you'd make it out. When they finally brought you out on that stretcher and you gave the thumbs up, I cried like a baby. He described coming to the hospital every day, watching me recover, being amazed by my strength. The inheritance I'm leaving you isn't charity, Robin. You earned every penny through your loyalty, your love, and your character. Use it however you see fit. I trust your judgment completely. But more than the money, I want you to know this. You made an old man's life worth living. You gave me purpose. You showed me what it means to be truly loved. The final paragraph broke me completely. Don't ever let anyone make you feel less than the extraordinary man you are. You're a hero, Robin. Not just because of what you did at that mall, but because of who you are every single day. You choose kindness over cruelty. You choose service over selfishness. You choose love over indifference. Those choices make you the best man I've ever known. I love you, grandson. I'm proud of you beyond words. Live well. Love fully. Keep being exactly who you are. Grandpa. The courtroom was filled with the sound of people crying. Even Judge Howard wiped his eyes. I put my head in my hands and sobbed. Diane put her arm around my shoulders. When I finally looked up, I saw my mother openly weeping. My father had his head bowed, shoulders shaking. Judge Howard called for a brief recess. People filed out quietly. Jake came up and hugged me. That was beautiful, man. Your grandpa really loved you. I know. I managed to say. I know he did. When court reconvened, Finch tried one last desperate strategy. He called a financial expert, who testified that $7 million was excessive for a grandchild, suggesting it proved manipulation. The argument was weak, and everyone knew it. Then Diane stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Robin Carter to the stand. My heart pounded as I walked to the witness box. I was sworn in and sat down, very aware of everyone's eyes on me. Diane approached gently. Robin, I know this is difficult. Can you tell the court about your relationship with your grandfather? I took a deep breath. Grandpa Samuel saved my life. Not in the dramatic way I save people in my job, but in the way that really matters. He saw me when I was invisible to everyone else. He loved me when I thought I was unlovable. My voice cracked, but I continued. Every Sunday for over 20 years, I went to his house. We cooked together. He taught me how to make his famous chili, how to grill a perfect steak, how to bake bread from scratch. We'd eat dinner and talk for hours. About everything. Life, dreams, mistakes, hopes. He never judged me, never made me feel small. He just listened and loved me. Did he ever mention his will or his money? Never. Not once. We talked about what mattered, how to be a good person, how to help others, how to find meaning in life. Money never came up. Tell the court about the mall collapse. I described that day in detail. Crawling through rubble, finding victims, the sound of screaming and metal groaning, the fear every time the structure shifted, and Emma, sweet little Emma, with her Disney princess backpack, trapped and terrified. I had to get to her. She was crying for her mom, and I couldn't leave her alone. So I stayed, held her hand, sang songs from Frozen because it was her favorite movie. When the secondary collapse happened, I covered her body with mine. My ribs broke, but she was safe. That's all that mattered. Several people in the courtroom were crying again. "Robin," Diane said softly, "did you know about your grandfather's inheritance plans before he died?" No. I had no idea he had that much money. He lived simply, drove an old truck, wore clothes until they fell apart. I thought he was comfortable but not wealthy. The $7 million was a complete shock. What would you have done if Head left you nothing? I looked directly at Judge Howard. I would have loved him exactly the same. He was my family. The only real family I ever had. That was enough. More than enough. Then Diane asked the question that changed everything. When you were in the hospital after the mall collapse, suffering from broken ribs, lacerations, and internal injuries, what went through your mind? I thought about Grandpa Samuel, about all the lessons he taught me. He always said when someone needs help, you help them. You don't think about the cost or the risk. You just do what's right. Those kids at the mall needed help. So I helped them. And your parents. I paused, choosing my words carefully. I didn't expect them to come. They'd made their choice years ago. I was sad about it, but I wasn't surprised. Grandpa Samuel was there, and that was all I needed. Diane asked a few more questions, then finished. No further questions, Your Honor. Finch approached for cross-examination. He tried to rattle me, suggesting Id manipulated Grandpa Samuel, that Id isolated him from my father, that Id calculated everything for financial gain. But every question just gave me the chance to tell the truth. By the end, even Finch looked defeated. As I stepped down from the witness stand, Diane called two more witnesses, Emma's parents. Laura Parker took the stand first. She was in her 30s, a teacher, with kind eyes that showed the trauma she'd survived. Mrs. Parker, can you tell the court about November 14th of last year? Laura's voice shook. That was the worst day of my life. Emma was at the mall with her grandmother, shopping for her birthday. I was at work when I heard about the collapse. I drove there like a maniac, and when I arrived, it was chaos. Fire trucks, ambulances, people screaming. I couldn't find Emma. Couldn't find my baby. She wiped tears away. Hours passed. They kept pulling people out, but not Emma. I thought she was gone. Then a firefighter told me a paramedic was with her, keeping her calm, refusing to leave until she was safe. That paramedic was Robin. Laura looked directly at me. When they finally brought Emma out, Robin came out right after her on a stretcher. He was covered in blood and dust, his face pale with pain, but he smiled at me and gave me a thumbs up, like he was saying she's okay. He saved himself last. He could have gotten out hours earlier, but he stayed with my daughter. Stephen Parker testified next, describing how Robin had spent 2 hours at the hospital with Emma before allowing doctors to treat his own injuries. How Robin visited Emma during her recovery, bringing coloring books and stuffed animals. We wanted to give Robin money to thank him, Stephen said. We tried to give him $10,000. He refused, said he was just doing his job. Just doing his job. He saved our daughter's life and wouldn't take a penny for it. Stephen's voice broke. These people are suing a man who saved our baby and wouldn't accept any reward. They're claiming he's manipulative and calculated. That's not the Robin Carter we know. As a hero who asks for nothing. When they finished testifying, Diane rested her case. The defense was complete. Everything was laid bare. Finch tried to salvage something in his closing, arguing about family rights and traditional inheritance expectations. It was hollow. Everyone in that room knew the truth. Then something unexpected happened. Before Diane could give her closing argument, Patricia stood up. Her chair scraped loudly on the floor. "Your Honor," she said, her voice shaking. "I need to say something." Douglas grabbed her arm, trying to stop her. She shook him off. Judge Howard looked surprised but nodded. Approached the bench. Patricia walked to the witness stand on unsteady legs. The bailiff swore her in. She sat down, trembling. "Mrs. Carter, what do you want to say?" Patricia looked at me for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. "Everything they've said is true. All of it. Every terrible word." The courtroom went completely silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a moment. Stunned. Patricia gripped the edge of the witness stand, her knuckles white. "I've spent the last 2 days sitting here listening to my father-in-law's letters, listening to testimony about what we did, and I can't keep lying to myself anymore." Her voice was raw, stripped of all the polished confidence she usually wore like armor. "Douglas and we built our entire lives around appearances. What people thought of us, what our friends said, whether we looked successful. And Robin," she looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Robin didn't fit into that picture. He wanted to be a paramedic. Not a doctor. Not a lawyer. Not something we could brag about at dinner parties. A paramedic." She laughed bitterly. "I told people my son was finding himself. That's what I said when they asked. I couldn't admit he was an EMT because I was ashamed. My God, I was ashamed of my own child for wanting to save lives." Douglas was frozen in his seat, his face completely pale. "We didn't go to his graduation. We didn't call on his birthday. We didn't visit when he was in the hospital dying. We didn't do any of it because we were selfish, because we were shallow, because we cared more about our image than our own son." Patricia's hands were shaking so badly she clasped them together. "The real reason we filed this lawsuit, it wasn't because we thought Samuel was manipulated. We knew he wasn't. Samuel was sharp until the day he died. We filed because we were embarrassed. This confession seemed to shock even Finch, their own lawyer. When Samuel's will was read, and our friends found out he left almost everything to Robin, they started asking questions. What did we do wrong? Why would a father cut out his own son? We couldn't admit the truth, that Wed abandoned Robin, that Samuel was right to do what he did. So we sued. We made up this story about manipulation because we couldn't face the real story." She looked directly at Judge Howard now. "I didn't know my son was a hero. I didn't know because I never asked. I never cared enough to Google his name, to watch the local news, to check in on his life at all. My son nearly died saving 12 people, and I didn't even know it happened." The courtroom was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. "Your Honor, please don't give us the inheritance. We don't deserve it. We don't deserve anything." Samuel knew exactly what he was doing. He saw us clearly. Maybe more clearly than we saw ourselves. His will should stand. She turned to me, her face crumbling. "Robin, I am so sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything. I know sorry doesn't fix 32 years of neglect and emotional abuse. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know how to ask for forgiveness. But you need to know. Your grandfather was right about everything. You're an extraordinary man, and I missed all of it because I was too busy caring about things that don't matter." She stepped down from the witness stand and collapsed into her chair, sobbing openly. The courtroom remained silent, processing what had just happened. Judge Howard turned to Douglas. His voice was hard. "Mr. Douglas Carter, do you have anything to say?" Douglas sat motionless for what felt like forever. Then, slowly, he stood. He didn't approach the witness stand, just spoke from where he was. "I spent my whole life measuring success by numbers." His voice was hollow, defeated. "By dollars and titles and possessions. By what I could show people, what I could prove. I learned it from my job, from the corporate world where everything is quantified and ranked." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "My father tried to teach me different. He tried to show me what mattered. But I thought he was old-fashioned, out of touch. I thought I knew better." Douglas looked at me for the first time with something that might have been real emotion. "I have a son who saves lives, who risks his own life for strangers, who loved his grandfather with complete devotion, and I threw him away." His voice cracked. "I told myself Robin was the one who walked away, that he chose to be distant, but I'm the one who closed the door. I'm the one who stopped calling. I'm the one who chose pride over love. I'm the one who decided his career wasn't good enough for me." He addressed Judge Howard directly. "Your Honor, we shouldn't have filed this lawsuit. My father's will should stand. He knew us all better than we knew ourselves. He saw that Robin has character and loyalty, and all the things that actually matter in life, things I lost sight of a long time ago." Then Douglas turned to face me fully. "Robin, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know how to ask for it. But I need you to know something. I'm proud of you. I should have said that 20 years ago. I should have said it every single day. I'm proud of you, son." His face twisted with emotion. "I read about the mall collapse after the fact, after this trial started. I Googled your name and found all the articles. I watched the news footage of them carrying you out on that stretcher, covered in blood and dust, and you were smiling, giving a thumbs up. And I thought, that's my son. That incredible, brave, selfless man is my son. And I don't even know him." Douglas sat down heavily and put his head in his hands. Patricia reached over and took his hand. They sat there together, two people who'd finally seen the truth about themselves. Judge Howard took a moment to compose himself. When he spoke, his voice carried weight. "I've been on the bench for 27 years. I've presided over thousands of cases, divorces, custody battles, estate disputes, criminal trials. This one will stay with me for the rest of my life." He looked down at the case file, then up at the courtroom. "This case has been presented as a dispute about undue influence. The plaintiffs claimed that Robin Carter manipulated his grandfather into changing his will. The evidence presented tells a completely different story. Judge Howard spoke about the medical records showing Grandpa Samuel's cognitive abilities, the testimony from doctors, lawyers, and neighbors, the phone records and calendars documenting who actually maintained a relationship with Samuel. Samuel Carter was of sound mind. The evidence is overwhelming and undisputed. He made his decision with full understanding, clear purpose, and for reasons that are entirely rational and justified." He looked at my parents. "You had every opportunity to be part of your son's life. 32 years of opportunities. You chose not to take them. Consequences follow choices. That's not a legal principle. That's a life principle. But it applies here nonetheless." Judge Howard picked up Samuel's letters. "These letters don't just distribute money. They teach a lesson. Money doesn't buy character. Success isn't measured in dollars. Family is earned, not entitled." Samuel Carter understood that. He lived it, and he tried to pass that wisdom to his son and grandson. He looked directly at me. "Mister, Robin Carter, your grandfather was a wise man. He saw in you everything that matters: courage, compassion, loyalty, and love. You earned this inheritance not through manipulation, but through being exactly who you are: a good man. Judge Howard straightened in his seat. The court finds that Samuel Carter's will was executed with full mental capacity, free from any undue influence, coercion, or manipulation. The will represents his true wishes and is legally valid in every respect. The plaintiffs have completely failed to meet their burden of proof. He picked up his gavel. Therefore, the court rules in favor of the defendant. The will of Samuel Carter stands as written. Robin Carter is the rightful beneficiary of the estate. Case dismissed. The gavel came down with a sharp crack. The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Howard allowed it, something it'd never seen before in a courtroom. People stood, clapping. Emma's parents were crying and smiling. Jake was whistling. My colleagues from the fire station were cheering. Diane shook my hand firmly. Justice served, she said with a satisfied smile. I felt like I was in a dream. It was over. It won. More importantly, Grandpa Samuel's wishes had been honored. His voice had been heard. As people started filing out, congratulating me, shaking my hand, I gathered my things slowly. I was emotionally exhausted, drained, but also strangely at peace. Then I heard footsteps approaching. I looked up to see Douglas and Patricia standing a few feet away. The crowd parted, everyone watching, tension thick in the air. Patricia spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. Robin, we know we don't have the right to ask. We know we've lost that right. But could we maybe buy you coffee sometime? Not to talk about money, not to ask for anything, just to try to get to know you. Douglas added quickly. We don't expect you to say yes. We don't expect anything. We've forfeited the right to expectations, but we want to try. If you'll let us. If you're willing to give us even the smallest chance to do better. The entire courtroom held its breath. This was the moment everyone was waiting for. What would I do? I looked at them for a long moment. Really looked at them. They looked older than I remembered, worn down, broken in a way that seemed almost physical. Patricia's makeup was smeared from crying. Douglas' expensive suit looked rumpled. All their polish, all their carefully constructed image, had crumbled away. And underneath, I saw two people who'd finally realized what they'd lost. I thought about what Grandpa Samuel would want, what He'd tell me to do. He'd always believed in second chances. He'd believed people could change, could grow, could learn. It was one of his core principles. But I also remembered all the years of pain. The empty seats at my school plays, the silent birthdays, the hospital room where I lay broken and they never came. You don't erase that in a moment. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, takes time. I need time, I said finally. My voice was steady but firm. This doesn't erase 32 years. You hurt me more than you'll ever fully understand. You made me feel worthless and invisible and unwanted. That doesn't go away because you finally see the truth. Patricia nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. We understand, but, I continued, Grandpa Samuel taught me that people can change. He believed in second chances. He believed in growth. I don't know if I can forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever completely. But I'm willing to see if you're serious about trying. I paused, letting them absorb that. One coffee. In a month. Well, see how it goes. No promises beyond that. You show up, we talk, and we see if there's anything to build on. If you're not there, or if you're late, or if you treat it like it doesn't matter, then we're done. Forever. Patricia broke down completely, putting her face in her hands. Douglas' eyes were wet. Thank you, he said quietly. Well, be there. We promise. Don't promise, I said. Just show up. I picked up my briefcase and walked toward the exit. At the door, something made me stop and look back. They were standing together in the middle of the courtroom, holding each other up, looking lost and broken, but maybe, just maybe, beginning to understand. I gave a slight nod and walked out into the afternoon sunlight. The next few weeks passed in a blur. The court's decision was final. Grandpa Samuel's will stood, and the $7 million was legally mine. But more than that, his message had been heard. His lesson about character and family had reached beyond just our small family drama. The local news covered the case, not extensively, but enough. The headline read, "Hero Paramedic Wins Inheritance, Battle Against Estranged Parents." It felt weird seeing my life reduced to a headline, but at least it was accurate. Jake brought me coffee one morning at the station. "You're famous again, man. First the mall, now this. Can't take you anywhere." I laughed. It felt good to laugh. I just want to go back to normal. Save some lives, eat bad station food, sleep through the boring shifts. Normal's overrated, Jake said with a grin. But I get it. Work helped ground me. Responding to emergencies, helping people in crisis, doing the job I loved, that was real. That mattered. The inheritance was still almost abstract to me. Just numbers in an account I barely looked at. I'd moved most of the money into conservative investments, used some for practical things, paid off my small condo, bought a reliable new truck to replace my 15-year-old beater, set aside money for future property taxes and expenses, but the bulk of it just sat there while I figured out what to do with it. What I really wanted was to honor Grandpa Samuel, to use his gift in a way that would make him proud. 3 weeks after the trial, I got a text from an unknown number. "This is Douglas. Just confirming coffee next week. Tuesday at 10 at the Riverside Cafe. Like we discussed." Well, be there. I stared at the text for a long time before responding. Okay. That Tuesday morning, I was nervous. More nervous than I'd been during the trial. I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early and got a table by the window, ordered black coffee, and waited. At exactly 10 o'clock, Douglas and Patricia walked through the door. They saw me and approached slowly, uncertainly, like they weren't sure they were allowed to be there. "Thank you for coming," Patricia said as they sat down. She looked different, less makeup, simpler clothes, her hair pulled back in a plain ponytail. Douglas wore jeans and a button-down shirt, not the expensive suits I was used to seeing. "I said I'd be here," I replied. "So here I am." The first few minutes were awkward, stilted conversation about the weather, about traffic, about nothing important. Then Patricia said, "We've been going to therapy, both of us, together and separately." That surprised me. "Oh," Douglas nodded. "After the trial, we realized we couldn't keep going the way we were. Something had to change. We had to change." He paused. "The therapist is helping us understand why we made the choices we did. It doesn't excuse anything, but it helps us see the patterns." We talked for an hour. They asked about my work, and for the first time in my life, they actually listened. Really listened. Patricia wanted to know about the mall collapse, so I told her about Emma, about the other people I'd helped save. Douglas asked about my daily routine, what calls were like, how I handled the stress. It was strange, surreal. These were conversations I'd wanted to have my whole childhood, and now, at 32, I was finally having them. Before we left, Patricia pulled out an old photo album. "I found this in storage. I'd forgotten I even had it." She opened it to show pictures of me as a baby, as a toddler, as a young kid. There I was at age 3, grinning at the camera with a toy truck. At age 5, covered in dirt from playing outside. At age 7, holding a fish I'd caught with Grandpa Samuel. "You smiled so much," Patricia said, her voice thick with emotion. "When did you stop smiling around us?" I didn't know how to answer that. When had I stopped? Gradually, over years of disappointment, I guess. I don't remember. I said honestly. We agreed to meet again in 2 weeks. Same place, same time. I didn't know if it would lead anywhere, if we could actually build something real. But I was willing to try, for Grandpa Samuel, and for myself. The second meeting was less awkward. The third one, Douglas asked if he could come to the fire station, see where I worked. I was hesitant, but agreed. He showed up on a Saturday afternoon when I was on shift. Jake gave him the tour while I finished some paperwork. I watched through the office window as Douglas asked questions, examined the ambulance, listened to Jake explain our protocols. Later, we got called out to a cardiac emergency, an older man having a heart attack at a grocery store. Douglas stood back and watched as Jake and I worked. We got the man stabilized, loaded him into the ambulance, transported him to the hospital. He survived. When we got back to the station, Douglas was sitting in the break room, his face pale. When he saw me, he stood up abruptly and walked outside. I followed, confused. I found him in the parking lot, leaning against his car, crying. "Douglas," I said uncertainly. "I'd never seen my father cry before. I watched you save that man's life." He choked out. "You were so calm, so competent, so focused, and I thought about all the years I told people you were wasting your potential. I've been so blind, so incredibly blind." He looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "You're amazing at what you do, Robin. You're extraordinary. And I missed all of it because I was too proud and too stupid to see what was right in front of me." I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to comfort him. Part of me was still angry. Both things could be true at the same time. "I'm trying," I said finally. "I'm trying to let you in, but it's hard." "I know," Douglas said. "We don't deserve another chance, but we're grateful for it anyway." Over the following weeks, something started to shift. Slowly, carefully. Patricia sent me a handwritten letter, 5 pages long, detailing her journey in therapy, her realizations about her own insecurities and fears. She didn't ask for forgiveness, just shared her process. Douglas started texting me articles about emergency medicine, about advances in trauma care, about studies on first responder wellness, little things that showed he was thinking about me, about my world. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, times when old patterns threatened to resurface, but they were trying, really trying. During this time, I also kept in touch with Emma and her parents. Emma was 7 now, doing well in school, mostly recovered from her physical injuries, though she still had nightmares sometimes. Laura had invited me to Emma's birthday party, and I'd gone, bringing her a big stuffed giraffe that was nearly as tall as she was. "Mr. Robin," Emma had squealed when she saw me, running over to hug my legs. "Mom said you might come." I spent 2 hours at that party, eating cake, playing games, watching Emma open presents. Her parents introduced me to all their friends as the hero who saved Emma. It was embarrassing, but also touching. As I was leaving, Stephen pulled me aside. "I heard about your court case, about your parents. I just want you to know, whatever happens with them, you've got people who care about you. Emma talks about you all the time. Your family to us." That meant more than he probably knew. I also started making plans for the Samuel Carter Foundation. I met with lawyers, accountants, nonprofit experts. We created a structure for scholarships targeting kids from difficult family situations who wanted careers in emergency services. The first scholarship would be awarded next year, $25,000 to cover training and education costs. We also set up a program to fund therapy and mental health support for first responders dealing with PTSD. I knew too many paramedics and firefighters who suffered in silence, who carried trauma from the job without adequate support. This program would help change that. The foundation's motto, taken from one of Grandpa Samuel's letters, was character over status. I had it engraved on a plaque that would hang in the foundation's office. One Saturday afternoon, 4 months after the trial, I drove to the cemetery. It was a clear fall day, leaves turning gold and red. I parked and walked to Grandpa Samuel's grave, under the old oak tree. His headstone was simple, gray granite with his name, dates, and a line head requested. He chose love. I sat down on the grass next to the headstone, brought fresh flowers, placed them in the built-in vase. "Hey, Grandpa," I said out loud. "I won." The will stood. "But you knew it would, didn't you? You always knew what you were doing." I told him about the foundation, about the scholarships, about the therapy program, about Emma's birthday party and how Shed drawn another picture of me with angel wings, about my cautious reconnection with Douglas and Patricia. "I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive them," I admitted. "Some wounds go too deep. But I'm trying to leave room for the possibility, because you taught me that holding on to anger only hurts me. You taught me to choose character over bitterness." A breeze rustled the oak leaves above me. I sat there in the quiet, feeling connected to Grandpa Samuel, even though he was gone. "You know what your real gift was," I said. "It wasn't the $7 million. It was the lessons you taught me, the values you instilled, the way you loved me unconditionally. That's the inheritance that really matters. That's what I carry with me every single day." I placed my hand on the cold granite. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. Thank you for loving me when I thought I was unlovable. Thank you for teaching me what real family means. I miss you every day, Grandpa. But I feel you with me. In every choice I make, every life I save, every time I choose character over convenience." I sat there a while longer, then stood to leave. As I walked back to my truck, my phone buzzed. Text from Douglas. "Are you free for dinner Sunday? Patricia's making pot roast. Wed, love to have you." I looked back at Grandpa Samuel's grave one more time, then typed my response. "Sure. What time? One step at a time." Just like Grandpa Samuel had taught me. 3 months later, I found myself standing in Grandpa Samuel's workshop. The house was mine now, part of the estate, and Id decided to keep it exactly as Head left it. The workshop still had all his tools hanging on pegboards, his workbench covered with half-finished projects, the smell of sawdust and wood oil in the air. Every Sunday, I came here, just like I used to visit him. I'd work on projects, using his old blueprints and notes. Today I was building a birdhouse, one of his classic designs. The familiar work soothed something in me, connected me to him across the distance of death. The last 6 months had been a journey I never could have predicted. The trial, the revelation of who my parents really were and what I'd become. The slow, painful process of deciding whether reconciliation was even possible. I'd met with Douglas and Patricia 7 times now. 7 coffee dates, 2 dinners, and 1 awkward Thanksgiving where we all tried too hard to pretend things were normal. It wasn't healing. Not yet. Maybe it never would be completely. But it was something. A beginning. A fragile bridge being built plank by plank. Patricia was genuinely working on herself. Shed joined a support group for parents estranged from their adult children. She was reading books about emotional neglect and learning, really learning, about the damage Shed caused. Shed started volunteering at a youth center, mentoring kids from difficult homes, maybe trying to give other kids what Shed failed to give me. Douglas had thrown himself into understanding my world. Had taken a first aid course, started following emergency medicine journals. Had even donated money to the fire department in Grandpa Samuel's name. Small gestures, but they meant something. Were we a family now? I didn't know. Could we ever be? Maybe not in the traditional sense. Too much damage, too many years lost. But we were something. We were trying. The real relationship in my life was still with Emma and her family. Emma had turned 8 last month, and her party had a superhero theme. Shed dressed as Wonder Woman and insisted I dress as Captain America. It obliged, feeling ridiculous, but happy. Shed made me a handmade card that said, "To the best hero ever," with drawings of me pulling her out of the rubble. That card was framed on my wall now, next to the Medal of Valor and the photo of Grandpa Samuel and me fishing. The Samuel Carter Foundation was officially operational. WED awarded our first scholarship to a 19-year-old named Tyler, from a foster care background, who wanted to become a firefighter. When I handed him the check at the ceremony, Head cried and hugged me. "You don't know what this means," Head said. "Nobody's ever believed in me like this." "Someone believed in me once," Id told him. Now I'm paying it forward. The therapy program for first responders had helped 16 people so far. 16 paramedics, firefighters, and EMTs getting the mental health support they needed. Jake had actually used it himself after a particularly rough call where WED lost a teenager to an overdose. "That program saved me, man," Head told me. "I was heading into a dark place. As for the $7 million, most of it was still invested. Growing. Secure. Id bought this house, Grandpa Samuel's house, and fixed a few things that needed repair. Replaced the old water heater, updated the electrical panel, repaired the roof. But I kept the character of the place intact. This was his home, his sanctuary, and I wanted to preserve that. Id thought about moving in permanently, but my condo was closer to work, so this house became my Sunday retreat, my connection point to Grandpa Samuel. I came here to think, to work with my hands, to remember. My phone buzzed. Text from Jake. "Dude, you see the news? That family from the apartment fire last month? They want to meet you. They're calling you their guardian angel." I smiled and texted back. "Just doing the job, man." But it felt good. Knowing Eid made a difference. Knowing I was living the values Grandpa Samuel had instilled in me. Another text came through. This one from Patricia. "Robin, I know we're not there yet. Maybe never will be. But I want you to know, I'm grateful for your willingness to try, for being more gracious than we deserve. Your grandfather raised you well." I stared at that message for a long time. It was the first time Shed acknowledged that Grandpa Samuel had raised me. That had been my real parent in every way that mattered. I typed back, "Thank you for saying that." That evening, I drove to the cemetery. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the rows of headstones. I walked to Grandpa Samuel's grave and sat down in my usual spot. "Hey, Grandpa. Big day." The foundation awarded its first scholarship. You should have seen this kid's face. He looked the way I probably looked when you told me I had worth. Like someone had turned on a light in a dark room. I pulled some weeds that had grown around the headstone, tidied up the flowers. I keep thinking about something you told me once. You said true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the lives you touch and the character you build. Everything else is just numbers on paper. You were right, Grandpa. You were always right. I looked up at the darkening sky. I'm doing okay. Really okay. The job's good. The foundation's helping people. And Douglas and Patricia, I don't know what we are. But we're something. I'm not doing it for them. I'm doing it for me. Because holding on to anger was like carrying around a weight that kept getting heavier. You taught me to put it down. A gentle breeze moved through the oak branches. I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The $7 million, it's changing lives. Tyler's scholarship, the therapy program, all of it. But you know what the real inheritance was? The lessons, the values, the love. You showed me that family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about showing up, about choosing to care, about being present even when it's hard. I stood up, brushed grass off my jeans. I miss you every single day. But I'm okay. More than okay. I know who I am. I like who I am. And that's because of you. You saw me when I was invisible. You loved me when I felt unlovable. You taught me that my worth isn't in what I achieve or what others think of me. It's in who I choose to be every day. I placed my hand on the headstone one last time. Rest easy, Grandpa. Your lessons live on. Your love lives on. I'm going to make you proud every single day for the rest of my life. I promise. As I walked back to my truck, I thought about the journey I'd been on. From that lonely kid in the basement bedroom, to the paramedic who saved 12 lives, to the man standing up in court for what was right, to this moment. It had been hard, painful, but also beautiful in its way. I'd learned that you can't make people love you or value you, but you can choose to value yourself. You can choose to be the person you're meant to be, regardless of who's watching or who's cheering you on. I'd learned that justice isn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just living well and being true to yourself. Most importantly, I'd learned that family isn't automatic. It's built through showing up, through caring, through being present. Grandpa Samuel chose me, and I choose to honor that choice every single day. I drove home as the stars came out, feeling complete. Not because of the money, not because my parents finally acknowledged me, but because I knew who I was, and I liked that person. Grandpa Samuel once told me, "Robin, true wealth is measured in the lives you touch and the character you build. Everything else is just numbers on paper." He was absolutely right. I'm the richest man I know, not because of what's in my bank account, but because of what's in my heart. And that's an inheritance no one can ever take away. So let me ask you this. What does family mean to you? Is it the people you're born to, or the people who show up for you when it matters? Have you ever had someone in your life like my Grandpa Samuel? Someone who saw you when others didn't? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and consider subscribing. Share this with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by others' opinions, but by who they choose to be. We're building a community here of people who believe character matters more than status. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this journey. I hope it reminded you that real family is chosen, that second chances are possible, but boundaries matter, and that the best inheritance isn't money. It's love and values that last forever. Take care of yourselves out there. Choose character over convenience. Show up for the people who matter. And remember, you're worth so much more than anyone's judgment of you. Until next time.